In this class, we are going to learn American or Canadian smoking. Both names refer to the same technique, in which by pinching and stitching some parts of the fabric, we can create texture on it to apply it in several crafts or even fashion. As you can see here, the possibilities are endless, and also you can try with different fabrics, which will expand even more those possibilities. To prepare the fabric to work with this technique, you need to draw a grid in the wrong side of the fabric. The example I'm showing you here, it has 3 centimeters by side of every square of my grid. You can do it as you wish. You can use also 3 centimeters or 1 inch or as much as you want. The bigger the squares in your grid, then the bigger your units of the smoking it will be. So you can make a really tiny squared grid, and you will get like more texture with small units of the design, or you can make really big squares and you can get bigger units of the design at the end. Obviously, it will also depend on the project you are going to do. Now, since the possibilities and the designs for this technique are practically endless, what I will show you in this video is how to read patterns for this technique. You can get books, you can get videos, you can get a lot of resources and patterns online, but the main thing is to know how to read it. So I will explain you in this video how to read the patterns for Canadian smoking. So all you have to do after learn that is search for the patterns you want to replicate, or even make your own patterns once you know how the technique works, and transfer it to the fabric and work on it as I will show you in this video. In most of the patterns you will find that it consists in a grid, as the same grid you have to draw in your fabric, because that will be the base or the guide for the units of the design. Then on the grid you will find these lines, maybe thicker or in another color, but the main thing is that you will notice a difference between these lines and the grid. And these lines represent the units of your design, and also the stitches and the points you have to give those stitches to get your design done. As you can see here, my units are only one angled line. Check, for example, only the first column of squares and you will have this angled line repeated in the same direction all over the length. And in the next line, what is usually common in smoking patterns is to repeat the same units but in opposite direction. So every line, however you want to see it, horizontally or vertically, is just the same units but repeated but in opposite direction than the previous one. This is common, but this is not always the same. You can also find patterns in which the modules are different in every line. Everything can happen in smoking, but the main thing is you to understand that a smoking pattern is made of units that repeat along all your pattern in a symmetrical or maybe also in asymmetrical directions. Now in this case our unit is only one angled line covering one square of our grid, but it can also be not only one line but a group of lines or a geometrical shape covering more squares of our grid, as I am showing you in this example. But in any case, the patterns will look like this mostly, and sometimes you will find also numbers that shows you a guide about the way you have to follow for stitch in case you need it. Also, you can find letters. In both cases, you have to follow the order of the numbers or the letters by increasing. I mean, you have to start by 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D, etc. And also sometimes you will find arrows to show you where to start the sample, and also another arrow to show you the direction to stitch the units one after another. Not all the patterns have the same indicators, but in any case I will show you in this video how to read the patterns, whether it has numbers, letters, or any. And for that, the first thing you need to understand is that the lines on the pattern represent the way the thread has to follow, going from usually from one corner of a square to another corner of the same square. Now, these corners that I am showing you here, pointed with dots, every corner of every square represents points where you have to give small simple stitches to gather the units in order to get the design done. So remember, every corner touched by a line in a pattern represents a place where you have to give a stitch, and every line on a pattern represents the way the thread has to follow to reach the next corner where you have to give the next stitch. For example, in this unit you have to give a stitch here where the line starts in the first corner, then get the thread through all the line following the pattern and give another stitch in the next corner of a square the line is touching. Since our unit in this example ends here, then what you have to do is pull the thread to bring these two corners together and create the gather for your unit, and repeat the same process again and again following the direction of the pattern or just the units the pattern is marking. Now, in case you find shapes instead of single lines in your pattern, proceed as the following. You have to start giving a stitch in the first corner of your shape, and then bring the thread along the line, which is the side of one of your shapes, and give a stitch in the next corner of the shape, which will also match one corner of one square of your grid. Give a stitch here, then move forward to the next corner of the shape. It will be here in this case, and then give another stitch in the next corner of your shape. For this example will be here, and finish in the first point you started. Then pull the thread to gather the three corners of this shape, for this example, to get your unit done. And in the case you find a pattern like this, some patterns are made of dots instead of grid. They mark only the dots which correspond to every corner of every square of the grid. The only thing you have to do is draw your grid normally in your fabric, and then just give the stitches following the dots and the lines as we were seeing the grid. Now let's see it in real. I draw this grid in the wrong side of my fabric for this sample, and every side of one of my squares of the grid is 3 centimeters. Remember, you can mark it the length you want depending on the design and the project you are working on, but the standard is 3 centimeters. These are the corners of every square, just to remind you that here are the places where we will give stitches depending on our design, and in every corner or every square it could be a place to give a stitch. Let me explain you how. I will draw a simple pattern for this sample to explain you how to work with units. And for that, in this line of squares, I'm going to draw angled lines, skipping one square, And in the next line vertically, I will do the same but changing directions and also changing the line of squares I am working on, like this, alternating. The next one, it will be the same like the first one. So one line is the opposite of the previous one. The last one, it will be the same like the second one. Just follow the opposite direction and the opposite line of squares from the previous line. And there I will have my pattern. Now, according with this pattern, I have to give a simple small stitch here in this corner, thread your needle with a single thread and make a knot at the end, and give a simple stitch here in the first corner where the line is starting, then bring the thread following the line and giving a stitch in the next corner where the line ends, like this, a simple stitch, and pull the thread to bring the two corners together. As you can see here, as I explained you in the pattern, I have a stitch here, the thread is following the line of the pattern, and I have another stitch in the corner where the line ends. So pull it tight, open it in this way, taking all the layers of fabric together, and give another stitch there, and make a knot to secure your stitch. In this way the gather will not open and it will keep our unit in place. Now you have to stitch the next unit, which it can be any which is the nearest to the point you have your thread. I will take this one, so take the thread through the corner where the next unit is starting, and this thread, I don't have any line here, so I will keep it there. For that, in the starting point of my next unit, I will make a knot, give a stitch and make a knot to prevent the thread to be pulled, so we will not gather any part of the fabric that we don't want to gather, like this. Now I have the thread in the starting point of my next unit and I can't pull it, as you can see. Bring the thread following the line of your unit and give a stitch in the next corner, like this. The thread is following the line. Pull the thread to gather the two corners. Give a stitch there, taking all the layers of fabric together, and make a knot again there to secure your unit. And we are going to proceed in the same way for every unit we marked in our fabric. The nearest one now in this case is this one here. So remember, after you finish gathering one unit, you need to bring your thread to the starting point of the next unit and secure it there so it will not gather. Make a knot and then stitch your next unit in the same way we did before. And our sample is ready. It looks like this from the right side. You can only see one motif because of the size of our sample. Now let's see a little bit more complicated one. We will make a rose pattern. A rose pattern is just a square, but a square conformed by two squares of our grid by side, like this. So in this case, the corners you have to work with is this I am marking here. Like every side of my shape of the pattern is taking two squares, so I need to take every corner of the squares of my grid when I am giving the stitches. This kind of patterns you will find it with numbers to indicate that you not only have to give stitches at the beginning and the end of every line, which is the side of your pattern, but also in the corners of the grid squares that are in the way of the lines of the shape, like here. In this case, I have to give a stitch in every corner of every square of my grid that the lines of the pattern is touching. That's why I marked it with small lines. So give your simple stitches there. Try to give your stitches in the same direction you will pull the thread, so it will be easy to pull it. Here, in this direction. Now the next corner my line is touching. Remember, if the pattern doesn't indicate that you have to stitch in every inner corner, then you just have to stitch in the corners of the shape that will also match with some corners of the grid. But in this case, we need to also stitch in the inner squares of the shape in this way. The next will be this one. And as I explained you before, you have to end in the first point you started, here. Now pull the thread to gather all together. And in this particular case, we will get like a bubble in the right side of the fabric. Take all the layers of fabric together and give a stitch. Pull it well, because when you have more layers, sometimes we don't realize and we are not pulling tight, so pull tight and give a stitch there and make a knot. You can also open the layers of fabric and give more stitches in more directions if you think your fabric need it, and make a knot. And as I told you, for this design of roses, we will have like a bubble in the right side of the fabric, like this. It's not so visible because we only have one unit for this sample, but if you repeat the same process in a big project, you will see the bubbles and the roses clearly. Now, something that you need to know about the smocking is that some patterns, like the previous one we made, after you finish gathering the units, you will get the design finished on your fabric. But in this kind of patterns, like this rose, and for some other patterns, you need to work with every unit after you gather, work on it on the right side of the fabric. In this case, we have to take the center of the bubble we got with tweezers, and we have to twist it to give shape to the rose. Hold the shape there and to give a stitch to secure the shape of it. Use the same color of your fabric. I am using this contrasting color so you can see it better in the video. Also for the grid you need to use pencil, not pen like me. I use pen only for you to notice it more in the video, but you use pencil or tailor chalk, something that you can erase by washing later. And there you have it. Here we have our rose motif there. And as I told you before, for some designs of a smoking that will indicate the pattern, you need to work with it in the right side of the fabric after you finish gathering, like in this case. Now I will work with a bigger sample so you can see clearly the motifs in the right side of the fabric. For this pattern I am drawing triangles alternating the position like this, and the largest side of the triangles is taking 2 squares and other sides are taking 1 square. This will be my first line. Next line of squares I will skip it, and then I will start working in this one, drawing my triangles in the opposite direction than the previous one. Then I am going to skip the next line of squares, and in the next one I am going to draw my triangles in opposite direction than the previous one, like this. I'm going to start with this unit here in the top. You can start in any extreme you want, and I have to gather these 3 corners. For that I'm going to start giving a stitch here in the first corner of my shape, as I explained you in the diagram at the beginning of this video. So give my simple stitch there. Now in the next corner, following the lines of my pattern, like this. Then in the next one, the line is ending here in this corner, so there I have to give my next stitch, and this pattern doesn't indicate that I have to give a stitch in that corner in the middle of the longest line, so I have to give it in the first place I start, and then gather it by pulling the thread like this. Now take your all layers of fabric together and to give a stitch there with a knot. A simple way to make a knot is give some rounds on the needle with your thread and then pull it. That is faster and gives you a clean knot. Now I will continue with my next unit. You can do it horizontally or vertically. Both are near. This one here is the nearest one horizontally, so I will start with the next unit here. I will bring my thread here, and remember, First, you have to secure your thread here. Here, don't pull it, leave it free, following this space. And before to start your next unit, secure it with a knot there. Once the thread is stable there, then continue with the next corner of your shape or the next corner or the next stitch your pattern is indicating you. Finished in the starting point, pull the thread to gather your unit and give a stitch and a knot there. Proceed in the same way with all your units. And the first line of units will look like this. Now let's move forward to the next line, working in the same way. And our sample came out like this. As you can see here, it also looks beautiful in the wrong side of the fabric. You can also use it in this side or in the right side if you prefer. This is the motifs we get with this pattern. You can keep it like this. You have a lot of possibilities with the smocking. You can keep it like this. It looks beautiful already. You can press it also. Put a fabric on it so you will be sure that all the motifs will fold in the same way and in the proper way. And iron it well. And now you can see the difference. This is another option to use this smocking pattern. This is like obviously flatter and it is making like squares, like bricks, like it's like a brick design. You can also keep it like this, or you can also work on it, gathering every square to form a ribbon. For that you only have to give some simple stitches in the center of every of our bricks, like this, just in the center line. Then pull the thread and you can insert a bead there and stitch it in the center of the ribbon. Pull it tight. And then make a knot in the wrong side of the fabric. Another variety of this design is to work with the wrong side of our design and stitch some beads in every corner of the squares marked in the wrong side. Repeat the same with every rectangle of our bricks to make more ribbons. You can make all ribbons or as many as you want. And it looks like this. And as usual, I am leaving you with some inspiration pictures about how to use smoking creatively in fashion for haute couture.